We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The biggest announcement out of last week's Canberra Talkfest was Labor's partial adoption of a coalition policy to freeze the construction code, which we developed to make it cheaper to build homes. And today, Labor announced a revised Morrison government policy, which we developed to help Australians get into their first home with a smaller deposit.
Order.
Prime Minister, why did it take a 3-day talkfest for you to realise that coalition policies work and Labor policies fail?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question, and it's very bold to say that coalition policies work when it comes to housing. Yep. Because for most of the time they were in office, they didn't even bother to have a housing minister. We on this side of the House have a $43 billion Homes for Australia plan, almost every element of which wasn't just opposed by those opposite and the Greens members for a period of time in what I dubbed the no-alition. They continued to oppose it, and they continue to oppose the announcements that we made over the weekend and this morning again today. Continue to oppose them. Now, tonight, indeed, in the Senate, they're debating a coalition motion to abolish the build-to-rent program. Now, that is a program to support increased private rentals, some 80,000 being built, that's been developed with the Property Council, but those opposite hate it so much they're moving a disallowance motion on it. We know they opposed the Housing Australia Future Fund. Now, there are Housing Australia Future Fund projects that have been contracted, some of which are already underway. It was delayed, of course, by those opposite. In the electorate of Farrer, 54 homes in Thurgoona. In Canning, 40 homes in Golden Bay. In Lindsay, 135 homes in Penrith. In Page, 32 homes in South Grafton and 9 in Casino. In Moncrief, 213 homes in Southport. In Goldstein, 37 homes in Hampton East. In Barrow, 48 in Thornley, 10 in Pennant Hills, Herbert, 81 in Cranbrook. Right around the country, people are benefiting from the Housing Australia Future Fund, which will build social and affordable homes. But of course, they opposed it. They opposed it, like they opposed the Help to Buy program, which is about shared equity schemes. And now, of course, on the increased home ownership with the 5% deposits, this is what Andrew Bragg, the Shadow Minister for Housing, has had to say. We will work to try and stop these crazy ideas coming into existence. That is what they've had to say. And then they ask a question saying that it's their policy. Well, if it's their policy, not only in the last term we saw them oppose everything that we put forward, now they're opposing, according to themselves, their own policy as well.
Call to the order. When the House comes to order, we shall hear from the honourable member for McNamara.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitment to help more young Australians and first home buyers realise the dream of home ownership? And what is standing in the way?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for McNamara for his question. He's a big supporter of affordable housing. He's doing great work as well as a special envoy for homelessness. His area that he represents, of course, is where this front line of services is often there. And I thank him for the work that he's doing, not just on behalf of the government but on behalf of needy Australians. Now, this morning I was in Lawson, an electorate here with the wonderful member Alicia Payne for her seat. Today we were with a young couple, Lockie and Abby. Now, they finished uni just a short time ago. in Wollongong University, and they've moved back to Canberra, and at age just 23 they were able to get into home ownership as a direct result of the 5% policy. Now they've been able to get a puppy. Doesn't come with the home, that's just an added bonus. Little Chili was very cute, I've got to say.
Order.
And they're an example of a family who are really benefiting directly from government policy. Now, in April, at our campaign launch in Perth, we committed to give every first home buyer the chance to buy their own home with just a 5% deposit.
Order.
And to cover the cost of lenders' mortgage insurance. We said these changes would start on the 1st of January next year, but we want to get on with it, which is why we've brought it forward to October the 1st. Together, these changes wipe years off the time it takes to save for a loan. So instead of having to pay to assist someone else's mortgage, or what they did for a short period of time, which is to stay here in Canberra with Abby's parents.
Order.
What they've been able to do is to get themselves into home ownership, putting those hard-earned dollars into an asset that will serve them for the future. Now, this announcement builds on action that we announced just yesterday as well about boosting supply. Fast-tracking 26,000 homes that are waiting for environmental approval, more prefab and different construction types to build more homes more quickly, and pausing the National Construction Code for 4 years. Because my government is determined to help people into home ownership, to help people into rentals and to help social housing as well, and that is precisely what we're doing in spite of the opposition of those opposite.
Call to the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Labor's three-day Canberra Talkfest delivered no real relief for Australians. There was nothing to cut power bills, lower grocery prices, nor reverse the biggest fall in living standards in the developed world. Instead, Labor has left the door open to higher taxes on people's savings, their super, their businesses, their homes and even their spare rooms. Why is it always the case that when Labor runs out of money, they come after hard-working Australians?
Order. The Treasurer will cease interjecting. Order. The Treasurer. The member for Spence is warned. Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for her question, which goes to how the government is helping people with cost of living pressures. And the question went to power prices and power bill relief. Well, we're delivering power bill relief that was opposed by those opposite at every time, like they opposed the cap on gas and coal prices that we instituted during our first term. We are, of course, increased people's wages by 3.5% on July 1, something that they have never done. The Coalition have never made a submission to the Fair Work Commission saying that minimum wages should keep up with inflation. Not once. But we've done it not once, we've done it not twice, we've done it 3 times, each and every year. We have put that forward. Of course, on July 1 also, paid parental leave went to 24 weeks and super is now being paid on government-paid parental leave, as an example of us not looking after just people today but looking after people for tomorrow as well, the retirement incomes of women in particular. We have, of course, a very successful program run by the Minister for Energy, which is cutting 30% of home batteries to permanently cut power bills. Now, that's been taken up by tens of thousands of Australians, particularly in our outer suburbs and our regions. On July 1 as well, paid prac for nursing, teaching, social work and midwifery students, something never supported by those opposite. We also, of course, have had legislation passed in this parliament cutting student debt by 20%, something that those opposite said was regressive, something that those opposite said was waste as well. So I find it extraordinary that we get asked a question in this place about cost of living and what assistance my government is giving. Because on the issue of tax that was also raised, what we know is that when we introduced our tax cuts on March at Stage 3 and then backed it up in March, the Stage 3 changes that we put in place to make sure all 14 million Australians got tax cuts, those opposite, including the Leader of the Opposition, said that they should wind it back, wind it back, wind it back.
Order.
Then on March 25th, this Treasurer introduced tax cuts not just once next year but the year after. Those opposite not only voted against it, they said that they would introduce legislation into this parliament to increase the taxes for all 14 million Australians. Only one side of this House is concerned, although a bit more than one side now,
The Prime Minister's
is concerned about cost of living, and that is
concluded.
this side.
The call to the member for Griffith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government helping Australians get into a home of their own, and are there any risks?
I give the call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Griffith for her question. She's only been here 3.5 months, Speaker, and she's already a hugely powerful advocate for helping more people in her community get into the dream of home ownership. Mr Speaker, housing is a life-defining challenge for millions of people around our country. We hear about it from young people, many of whom feel they will never have the chance to own their own home. We hear it from parents who feel immense guilt that they cannot give their children the stability that they grew up with. We hear it from renters whose rents are going up too high and too often. Now, Speaker, since we came to government, we've already seen 180,000 Australians get into home ownership with our government's backing. But let's be absolutely clear. First home buyers in this country need and deserve more support, and that is exactly what they're going to get under the Albanese government. Speaker, today the Prime Minister announced that we're expanding our 5% deposit scheme to be available for the first time to every single first home buyer in our country. We promised we'd do this at the election, and we're delivering 3 months early. These changes will now roll out from 1 October this year. Speaker, there will be no income limits. There will be no limit on the number of places, and we'll have house price caps that actually reflect the cost of the homes where you live. Now, Speaker, so many Australians that I talk to are in housing distress because they just can't see that pathway to getting into the housing market. This 5% program expansion will change the lives of tens of thousands of Australians every single year, and it's actually not that often that the federal parliament can do something that meaningful that quickly. We saw the proof in the pudding this morning, Speaker, and the PM mentioned that we got the chance to meet with the member for Canberra, two of her fantastic constituents, Lockie and Abby. This is an absolutely gorgeous young couple who have just bought their own home, and they've done it with the backing of our government with a 5% deposit. Now, Lockie and Abby talked about this experience they've had of buying their own home. They said they never would have been able to do this without the 5% deposit scheme. And, Speaker, they just described this immense relief that they feel that they can spend their mid- and late 20s paying off their own mortgage, not someone else's. So they're fully settled into this beautiful home in Canberra. They've got a gorgeous little dog, Chili, not as cute as Toto, Speaker, but definitely up there. And they now host these, yes, exactly, PM, right here for you. And they they told us about how they're hosting these regular movie nights in their own home, and it was just these simple pleasures that come with that stability that we've been able to support them with. Now, Speaker, that's not all on home ownership. We'll expand this scheme on 1 October. Before the end of the year, Help to Buy will provide the opportunity eventually for thousands of people to get into home ownership. We're tackling the housing crisis from every angle, Speaker, building more homes, making it better to rent, making it easier to buy, and on 1 October our government will open up a realistic pathway for tens of thousands of Aussies this year to get into their own home.
Before I call the member for Clark, I'll just do some quick acknowledgements. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is a Canberra Fellowship delegation from Timor-Leste, led by Mr Domingos Auguste, President of Timor-Leste Parliamentary Committee B. Accompanied by the delegation is Her Excellency Ms Minez Maria Delamar, the Ambassador of Timor-Leste. I'm also pleased to advise the House we are joined by the by Ambassador Valeria Suquia and the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Uruguay, who is accompanied by the Ambassador Diana Lapierre, Ambassador of Uruguay to Australia. On behalf of all members, welcome to the House of Representatives. Give the call to the honourable member for Clark.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Financial Services. Minister, the insurance industry is failing Australians. For instance, health insurance premiums are sky high, but returns to policyholders are at rock bottom, while payments to private hospitals are, in fact, still so bad that many are in financial distress or closing. Meanwhile, for property insurance, premiums are going through the roof and vast areas are being declared uninsurable. Minister, what exactly is the government doing about this?
I'll give the call to the Assistant Treasurer and the Minister for Financial Services.
I thank the member for his question, and I commend his long-term advocacy for the people of Clark and his thoughtful contribution on a wide range of policy issues during my time in this chamber. I do acknowledge that a number of households across our community are feeling cost of living pressures in insurance, whether it be property insurance or health insurance. I'll deal with property insurance first. And can I say that this is a long-standing and complex issue? I do want to acknowledge the member for Calare and my predecessor Stephen Jones for having initiated or promoted an inquiry into flood insurance, which I chaired in the previous term. That was an inquiry which dealt with a range of issues which were much broader than flood insurance, though, and which went to systemic issues of risk across a number of communities. And can I say that coming out of that inquiry there were 86 recommendations, most of which were unanimous across members of the government, members of the opposition and the crossbench. There are already a range of things that are occurring as a result of those recommendations. For example, the General Insurance Code of Conduct is now going to be approved by ASIC, a measure which the industry has accepted and which I say is at least in part a result of that inquiry. In addition, the General Insurance Code of Conduct will be enforceable going forward once it is redesigned by the industry in consultation with other stakeholders. They are measures which will make a real difference to consumers. In addition, work is underway to standardise certain terms which the industry is undertaking and which I am engaging with industry and consumer groups in relation to. Again, that will make insurance policies easier for consumers to digest. And there are a range of other processes underway to make sure that the actual clauses in the Insurance Code of Conduct provide protections, appropriate protections around cash settlements, around temporary accommodation and other issues. Can I also say that the work of my colleague, the Minister for Emergency Services, continues. The Disaster Ready Fund and the Hazards Insurance Partnership are key measures by which the government is spending far more on mitigation than it used to and is informing those projects through the Hazards Insurance Partnership. Those projects, as they roll out, will significantly reduce risk in high-risk areas, and those projects will see premiums come down in those communities that benefit. So those are practical things occurring, both in terms of consumer protections but also dealing with the underlying risk. The member also raises health insurance, and while that's not directly in my portfolio, can I say that the Minister for Health and Ageing is working closely with the sector on this issue. He has established a CEO forum by which CEOs across both health insurers and hospitals are working collaboratively on very complex issues. The government presented a package of reforms to the Private Health CEO Forum to make maternity, mental health and hospital in the home services more available and affordable. So across both those areas, general insurance on property but also health, the government has a range of short-term and long-term measures for the benefit of consumers.
The call to the member for Cornwall.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. What progress has been made at the Economic Reform Roundtable, especially to build more houses more quickly?
The call to the Treasurer.
Mr Speaker, the member for Cornwall brings so much to this place and we're really looking forward to working with him on the cost of living, on housing and on the economy more broadly. Housing approvals in our economy are up almost 30% since this time last year, and that's a good reminder of the work that we are doing and the progress that we're making, but we acknowledge that we've still got a very long way to go together. We know it still takes longer to approve a house than to build one, and that there's more to do to hit our ambitious housing target. And that's why the announcements we made yesterday and today are so important, especially when it comes to approvals. I pay tribute to the Housing Minister and the Environment Minister for yesterday's announcement in particular. We are blitzing the approvals backlog and we are building more homes. And there was very strong support for this urgent action at the Economic Reform Roundtable. It's a very good example of the consensus and the momentum that we were able to build there in really important areas. Housing was a key consideration, but it wasn't the only focus. More broadly, we know that the best way to grow living standards over time is to make our economy more productive and more resilient and our budget more sustainable. We also know that the worst decade for productivity growth in this country was the 2010s under those opposite. And we know that weak productivity growth has been part of our economy for the last couple of decades, not just the last couple of years, and it's also a challenge shared around the world. It will take time to turn it around. But the Economic Reform Roundtable was a really cherished opportunity to sharpen our focus, to share our ideas, to build some consensus and to build some much-needed momentum in our economy. And there were 10 reform areas agreed as priorities. 1, housing, as I said. Secondly, a single market in the Federation. Thirdly, simpler trade and tariffs. 4, better regulation. 5, faster approvals. 6, AI as a national priority. 7, attracting investment. 8, skills. 9, tax. And 10, modernising government, Mr Speaker. Now, from these directions, we are already working up urgent actions like those announced yesterday by my colleagues, and there is more to come, Mr Speaker. We have been making progress in our economy. We've seen that in the inflation data. We've seen it in interest rates coming down and real wages growing. We have an agenda. We're focused on delivering the agenda that we took to the election, but we know that the best way to work out the next steps in our economy and in our country is to do that in our usual considered and consultative and collaborative way, because we know that the best progress we can make, whether it's in housing or the economy more broadly, is to make that progress together.
Call to the member for Grey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Albanese Labor government has presided over a historic rise in red tape in the housing sector, including over 1,500 new regulations in the Treasury and infrastructure portfolios, as well as a massive expansion of the national construction codes. However, yesterday the government suddenly decided to copy the Coalition's policy of freezing the code. While the Coalition welcomes the vote of confidence in our policies, will the Prime Minister now admit Labor's housing policies are unfit to solve Australia's housing crisis?
Order. Before I call the Prime Minister, the member for Jellyman was interjecting continually during that question. He'll leave the chamber under 94A. You might be laughing, but it's not funny. People are entitled to be asked their question and to be heard in silence, just as every minister. We're not having any of that. The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for Grey for his question, and I congratulate him on his election, and I'm sure that he would welcome the work that this government is doing in protecting jobs in Whyalla and in his area, and it's a great electorate where we are working hard to make sure that we continue to protect that industry, to protect that jobs, and to make sure those regional communities thrive. I must say something that my government has focused on in the last few years. I'm asked about housing, and the member suggests that maybe his shadow housing minister was wrong or this was ambiguous, but it doesn't sound ambiguous to me as a result of our announcement. Andrew Bragg, the shadow minister, said this: "We will work to try and stop these crazy ideas coming into existence." That was actually his response, not something that was supporting it, not trying to claim that they were in favour of it, just like the same shadow housing minister is trying to disallow progress in the Senate later today in a vote that will be held. Now, maybe the member can have a word with Senator Bragg, ring him up this afternoon and say, "Mate, I think you've got this wrong. I think you've got this wrong. I think you should back in the government on our policies. And while they're at it, they can back in our entire Homes for Australia plan, because it's certainly being backed in by coalition state ministers. Sam O'Connor has spoken about round two, the Queensland Housing Minister, by the way, Round 2 of the Housing Australia Future Fund will support us to build 1,005 new community homes at 17 sites across Queensland. This new deal is what it looks like when governments work together and focus on outcomes. Queensland LNP are a bit more supportive of us than they were of some people over there over the weekend when they were out there trashing net zero, to the tune of over 90%, including the National Party leader voting against the Liberal Party leader, showing the chaos that is their opposite, the chaos that has brought them to the position they're in today. Well, we on this side of the House will continue to put forward positive policies that make a difference to people, whether it is improving home ownership, improving the number of rentals, improving social and affordable housing, supporting greater rental assistance. We on this side of the House are focused on cost of living, are focused on housing. Those on that side just have Liberals fighting each other, the Nats fighting each other and the Liberals fighting the Nats. We on this side are fighting for Australians. They're just fighting each other.
Order. I do not need interjection with the word time. As I've explained to the House before, it can work both ways. When shadow ministers and opposition members are within the 30 seconds and haven't asked their question, we can simply move on. So try and give everyone a fair go. We do not need to be reminding all the time of the clock. Trust me, I've got it in hand. Give the call to the member for Melbourne.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. How is the Albanese Labor government helping Australians with a student debt to be able to own their own home? What has been the response to these reforms?
Give the call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And can I thank the member for Melbourne for a question? She gets this. She represents more young people with a student debt than anywhere else in the country. And young people don't always see something for them come election on the ballot paper, but they did this year, and they voted for it in their millions. They voted for cuts to student debt by 20%, and they voted for measures that we're taking to make it easier to buy your first home. One of those is what the Prime Minister and the Treasurer and the Housing Minister just spoke about, being able to buy a home with as little as a 5% deposit. Now, Mr Speaker, we have now passed laws to cut student debt by 20%, and that will help 3 million Australians, a lot of them young Australians, just out of TAFE, just out of university, just out of home, just getting started. But that legislation doesn't just cut their debt, it also cuts their repayments, and that will make it easier to save for that 5% deposit. For someone on an income of $70,000, it will reduce the repayments that they have to make each year by about $1,300. That's a lot of money. It means more money in their pocket rather than the government's. That's real help to help save for that deposit. And that was a recommendation from the Universities Accord. But, Mr Speaker, there's something else that we're doing here too. One of the other things that the Universities Accord pointed out was problems with the way banks look at HECS when they're assessing whether to give you a home loan or not, and it recommended changes here too. I want to pay tribute to the Treasurer here for the work that he has done. He's asked APRA and ASIC to look at this, and in February of this year we announced that they would update their guidance to banks to make it easier for Australians with a student debt to get a mortgage. And that's now happened. That happened in June. Under these changes, I'm advised that a dual-income couple with student debts could borrow up to $150,000 more for their first home when combined with the tax cuts and the interest rate cuts that have happened over the last 12 months or so. HECS shouldn't be a handbrake on home ownership, and that's why we're doing this. We're doing what we promised. We're cutting student debt and we're making it easier to buy a home, a first home, with a 5% deposit. And the changes that we're making to the HECS repayment system and advice to banks are an important part of that.
Give a call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer introduce quantifiable fiscal rules to contain his spending spree?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
I was hoping you could ask me that, Mr Speaker, because it gives me the opportunity to remind the House that the three fiscal rules that those opposite took to the election was, number one, higher taxes, number two, bigger deficits, number three, more debt. Those were the fiscal rules that those opposite took to the most recent election, Mr Speaker. And so the dishonesty and the hypocrisy at the core of that question is astonishing, even by their low standards, Mr Speaker. It shows that they have absolutely no idea and absolutely no shame, Mr Speaker. It wasn't even 4 months ago that they took a policy for higher taxes, bigger deficits and more debt to the most recent election, Mr Speaker. Now, what matters here when it comes to fiscal rules? What matters is the outcomes, and in office they failed every single test that they set for themselves, Mr Speaker. Now, we have fiscal rules to guide us in the budget. Those rules are to improve the budget position, and we have. They are to get that down as a share of the economy, and we have. They are to bank upward revisions to revenue, and we have, Mr Speaker. We have fiscal rules in our budget, and we have been complying with our fiscal rules. There are always a range of views about how to update those rules. Those views are welcome. We consider our fiscal rules before every budget, Mr Speaker. Those rules are important, but what matters more than that are the outcomes. And here's the difference between this side of the House and that side of the House. The reason I am so delighted that the member for Fairfax has asked me this question, Mr Speaker, because on our watch we have turned big Liberal deficits into substantial Labor surpluses, the first surpluses in almost 2 decades. We have engineered the biggest positive turnaround in a budget in nominal terms in the history of the Federation. We have banked most of the upward revisions to revenue. We found $100 billion in savings. We have limited real spending growth to 1.7%. We've got debt down by $177 billion, Mr Speaker. That means $60 billion less debt interest that Australians have to pay, Mr Speaker. And we've got debt to GDP down from 45 under them to 37 under us, Mr Speaker. Now, those opposite had fiscal rules which weren't worth the paper that they were written on. They said there'd be surpluses, there were only deficits. They said they'd save upgrades, they spent most of them. They said they'd reduce payments, payments went up. They said they reduced debt, and debt doubled even before COVID, Mr Speaker. Never, ever forget. And they went to the election with higher taxes and bigger deficits and more debt. They haven't changed a bit. They haven't learned a thing, and that's why nobody should take them seriously on the budget.
Give the call to the member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to boost apprenticeships, including to build more homes for Australians? What obstacles are there?
Give the call to the Minister for Skills and Training.
Thanks, Speaker, and I thank my friend, the member for Hasluck, for her question. I recognise her deep commitment to the people she represents so well in this place, and in particular to ensuring that they can get the skills they want to do the jobs that we need. And in the Albanese Labor government, we are building Australia's future and boosting the workforce we need to deliver it so that we can deliver on our national priorities. But, Speaker, when we came to government just over 3 years ago, Australia was facing the worst skills crisis in more than half a century. This didn't come about by accident. It followed a decade of neglect from those opposite, undermined by their failure to land a national skills agreement in a decade and billions of dollars in cuts. Apprenticeship numbers fell away. And it's clear, it's very clear, Speaker, that they still haven't learned. It was in this House that the now Leader of the Opposition said, if you don't pay for something, you don't value it. In opposing the Free TAFE bill, the more than 47,000 Free TAFE construction students in construction courses demonstrate that Australians disagree. So on this side of the House, we're backing the next generation of tradies. We've doubled we've upped the living away from home allowance for the first time in 20 years, and we've doubled the amount we provide to employers to take on an apprentice living with a disability. The most recent data shows us that construction industry apprenticeships are up 11% compared to pre-pandemic. But we are leaving no stone unturned when it comes to boosting apprenticeships, so we can build more homes for Australians. That's why we are supporting new housing construction apprenticeships tradies through $10,000 in incentives, and we're already seeing promising results after just a month. We know these incentives, which are also really important cost of living relief, are encouraging more Australians to pick up the tools and to become tradies, to gain skills, make a contribution and build a career. And I think about people like Blake and Calvin, pre-apprenticeship carpentry students at Victoria University's Sunshine campus. Calvin wants to one day start his own carpentry business, and it's free TAFE that's opening that pathway together with our incentive program. Now, Speaker, this incentive program builds on the very successful new energy stream as well, which has already seen more than 11,000 Australians take up training and jobs in clean energy, electrical and automotive fields. And while I'm on my feet, I want to recognise in the gallery today we're joined by Ausgrid Electrical Apprenticeships from New South Wales. It's great to see them here. It was so great to visit one of their sites earlier this year with my friend, the member for Reid, and meet 50 new apprentices starting that week. Speaker, we're pulling every lever to help Australians get secure, well-paid jobs in nation-building industries. This government, unlike members opposite, will always back Australian apprentices to build Australia's future.
Before I call the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, order. The member for Wright, I'm trying to acknowledge someone in the gallery. Pleased to inform the House that today we are now joined by a parliamentary delegation from the Committee on the National Defence, Security and Foreign Affairs of the National Assembly of Vietnam, led by His Excellency General Le Tan Thuy. On behalf of all members, I wish you a warm welcome to Australia, in particular to the House of Representatives. I give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Prime Minister. I refer to the Treasurer's claim in his previous answer that he has a fiscal rule to control spending, which is to bank most of the upward revision in revenue. However, according to his own pre-election budget, the upward revision in revenue was $8 billion, and he plans to blow the lot, plus another $26 billion. Will the Prime Minister insist his Treasurer introduces quantifiable fiscal rules to stop his spending spree?
Call to the Prime Minister.
To the Treasurer, I will take the opportunity to say that I'll insist that this Treasurer continue to do the great work that he has done over the last 4 years and not follow the rabbits opposite down that hole, which they dug year after year after year when they were elected with a policy in 2013 of producing a budget surplus first year and every year thereafter. And they came in, they slashed education, they slashed health, and they managed to produce zero budget surpluses. And then they went to the recent election. It is some achievement, Mr Speaker, to go to an election saying we are going to have higher taxes for 14 million Australians and we're going to have higher deficits as well over 2 years.
The Deputy Leader on a point of order.
On relevance, Mr Speaker, I asked the Prime Minister a very clear question about whether or not he will insist his Treasurer, given the facts I provided, that he in fact blew the revision, whether or not he will insist that his Treasurer introduces fiscal rules.
All right. I just ask you to resume your seat. The Prime Minister is insisting the Treasurer, but I'll just draw him back to the question to make sure he's being directly relevant to the answer.
It was very relevant, saying the position that I support and what I will instruct the Treasurer to do is to keep doing the fantastic job that he's doing. That is what I will do. And what I won't do is be put off by the sternness that we used to see when the member opposite stood up supporting his nuclear power plan. That would blow a hole in the budget worth hundreds of billions of dollars. I ask the Treasurer to add to the answer.
Treasurer has the call.
Thanks, Speaker. I'll give you three numbers, Mr Speaker. Under this government, we've banked about 70% of upward revision to revenue. Under those opposite, it was about 40%. Under Howard and Costello, it was about 30%. And what that tells the House, Mr Speaker, what that tells the Shadow Treasurer, is that we bank most of the upward revisions to revenue and they spend most of it. And that's why their fiscal rules in office weren't worth the paper that they were written on, Mr Speaker, because they failed every single test that they set for themselves. They said they'd deliver surpluses. They went none for nine, complete donuts, Mr Speaker, when it comes to surpluses. We delivered surpluses in our first 2 years in office, Mr Speaker. And so what matters here is the fiscal rules and also the outcomes, and we've been able to make some good progress cleaning up the mess that was left to us by those opposite when they left us $1 trillion in Liberal debt, when they left us huge deficits as far as the eye could see. And we turned 2 of those Liberal deficits into 2 substantial Labor surpluses, Mr Speaker. And so we will stack up our record on responsible economic management against those opposite any day, Mr Speaker, and I hope that these questions continue. Because when I was told, Mr Speaker, that the member for Fairfax gave a speech about Charlie and the chocolate factory, I confess that the word wonka was almost the word that came to mind.
Order. Order. When the House comes to order, we shall hear from the honourable member for Deakin.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. How is the Albanese Labor government building more homes and addressing the housing crisis the government inherited?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Deakin for his question. I'm thinking back to the first speech he gave to this chamber just a few short weeks ago, where he spoke with such passion about his desire to see young people in his community be able to have the opportunity to settle permanently in Melbourne's beautiful eastern suburbs. And, Speaker, I know he's hugely proud of being a government that's tackling this housing crisis confronting our country from every single angle. Now, Speaker, we're in the middle of a housing crisis that's been cooking in our nation for 40 years. For 40 years, our country has not been building enough homes. And whether it's a generation of young people who feel locked out of the market, whether it's renters whose rent is going up too high and too fast, the fundamental problem that we face in housing in this country is that we have a housing shortage. Now, Speaker, we delivered immensely on the housing agenda in the last term, and we're seeing real results for Australians right across the country. Speaker, just in the last term, 180,000 people around this country got into first home ownership with the backing of the Albanese government. And in case you haven't heard, that program will be uncapped and available to every first home buyer in the country on 1 October. Speaker, it's not just home ownership. In that last term, 1 million households around our country got access to a 45% increase to Commonwealth rent assistance. And of course, Speaker, you're well aware that we've got 28,000 social and community houses under construction at the moment. Now, Speaker, what we know about a housing shortage is that there's really only one way out of it, and that is building, Speaker. We've got to build more homes, and that's the ultimate answer to our housing issues as a country. Since we came to office, about 500,000 homes have been built in Australia. Now, Speaker, a lot of progress is being made on this front. Construction costs have stabilised. Now, we've got the opposition leader piping up here. I might remind her that when she left office, construction costs in this country were rising at 17% a year, Speaker. That's the highest in 50 years. That number has come down to 1.6%, Speaker, below inflation where it belongs. We're seeing real progress on skills and apprenticeship, and despite all the carping from those opposite, Speaker, the proof is in the pudding, because year on year housing approvals in this country are now up 30% since the same time last year. Now, Speaker, it hasn't happened by accident, and you saw our government make some really important announcements yesterday on the supply side. We're building on our $43 billion housing agenda. We've announced a pause and streamline of the National Construction Code so we can let builders get on with building. We've also announced, Speaker, that we're going to fast-track environmental approvals for more than 26,000 homes. And, Speaker, the Property Council said that these measures alone are going to unlock tens of thousands of new homes for Australians. Now, Speaker, we need to keep on building. That's the only answer here, and that's why that's exactly what our government is doing.
give the call to the honourable member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Ageing and Health, Disability and the NDIS. Minister, the Medical Research Future Fund was set up to be a $20 billion fund, which was to disburse $1 billion a year. It's now worth $24 billion, but you're spending only $650 million a year, while our researchers are struggling with cost pressures and geopolitical uncertainties. Will you release this funding? Will you help our medical researchers achieve their potential and work for the benefit of all Australians?
Call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care and the Minister for the National Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thanks, Speaker, and thanks to the member for Kooyong for that question. I want to acknowledge her esteemed career as a clinician researcher in paediatric neurology before coming to this place over many years, part of, frankly, the amazing Melbourne community of health and medical research that has helped over decades make Australia one of the leading jurisdictions in medical research in the country, consistently winning more than 40% of NHMRC grants. Victoria really is the centre of our health and medical research ecosystem. It pains me to say as a South Australian, but it is. It absolutely is. The MRFF has really added to that capacity in a really significant way, and I want to pay credit to the former government for setting up the MRFF early in their term. It flowed from I tried to give the Leader of the Opposition a compliment, but couldn't stand it. Couldn't quite stand it. It flowed from a review I commissioned 14 years ago that Simon McKeon, who was the Australian of the Year at the time, conducted because, frankly, our budget for medical research was topping out, then at about $650 million a year. The recommendations were to lift that significantly. It's now $1.5 billion a year because of the MRFF, as well as increases in the NHMRC budget. That's almost 2.5 times the budget that we had at the time the McKeon review was set up. It also established, as the member knows, a priority-driven part of research, so that priorities around brain cancer, dementia, mental health and such like could be subject to research funding and not just investigator-initiated research from the NHMRC.
Order. The member for Kooyong on a point of order.
It's a pretty simple question, Mr Speaker. Is the Minister going to disburse more money from a fund which is overfunded to the tune of $4 billion already?
Yes, I can appreciate the member would like a direct answer, but I need to make sure the Minister is being directly relevant under the standing orders, and so far he is. He has another 1 minute 12 seconds to address the other parts of the question, and I'll ask him to make sure his answer is directly relevant.
Thank you. The member asked about the addition of capability for researchers, and I was trying to address the fact that not only is there 2.5 times as much money, there's also a priority-driven stream of research funding now that I think is a real addition to what we've had for decades. The member is right. There has been a policy decision in government, going back to the former government, to cap allocations from the MRFF at $650 million a year, which, as I said, added to the $850 million budget of the NHMRC, adds up to that $1.5 billion. And I know there is a debate within the research community about that. That debate will play out excuse me, again, as part of the development of a national strategy for health and medical research. A draft of that strategy is due to be published very shortly, and I'm sure there'll be a discussion about the maximum allocation. And also the Treasurer and Finance Minister have just conducted their 10-year statutory review of the MRFF, and that review will be published shortly as well.
Call to the honourable member for Solomon.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting wages and job creation, especially so that we can build more homes for Australians?
Call to the Minister for Employment and the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Solomon for his question, but also his commitment to those working Australians right across the country, but also in Darwin and Palmerston, and making sure that they can earn more and keep more of what they earn. Of course, in our first term, we have improved workplace laws, which are now delivering real wage increases and more secure jobs. The most recent data released by the ABS confirmed that real wages have now grown 7 consecutive quarters under the Albanese Labor government. And of course, the data also demonstrates the strongest annual real wages growth in 5 years. ABS data also confirms that the government is delivering more jobs for Australians. Since we were elected in May 2022, we've seen more than 1.1 million jobs created. This is an 8.6% increase, which represents a higher rate of employment growth than all other major advanced economies over the same period. Now, of course, we have ambition for more jobs. We are not going to be complacent. We're committed to creating more jobs for Australians, including those in the construction industry. Our housing plan to build more homes more quickly not only ensures that people have a roof over their head, but will create more job opportunity in the construction industry. By streamlining housing approvals and cutting red tape, taking action on delays in approvals, as the Housing Minister has said, we'll see more builders and tradies on construction sites rather than filling out forms. Now, not only are we focused on creating more jobs now, but we're also focused on creating and preparing young Australians for construction jobs of the future. And that's why we are delivering free TAFE right across the country for students who are taking up the opportunity to take on a course and get a job in the construction industry. Of course, we've also established $10,000 incentive payments for apprentices who finish an apprenticeship to ensure Australia has the workforce it needs to build homes. We are committed to building more homes in Australia, creating more jobs in the construction industry and ensuring young Australians have the training they need for jobs in the industry. It is only this government that is absolutely committed to building Australia's future by getting wages moving, by creating more jobs and, of course, building more houses. It is under our government Aussie workers are earning more and keeping more of what they earn, and we'll keep doing that even in the face of those opposite.
Before I call the Leader of the Nationals, I just would like to acknowledge Year 6 from Burraneer Bay Public School in the electorate of Cook who've joined us in the gallery. And I give the call to the Leader of the Nationals.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Treasurer, a single US private company owned by a US church was able to purchase almost $500 million worth of Australian prime agricultural land in around 6 months without the requirement of oversight from the Treasurer or the Foreign Investment Review Board. Will the Treasurer commit to a review of the thresholds that were put into effect 20 years ago to give farming families an opportunity to compete in buying Australian farms?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the Nationals for his question. I think, as he knows, the House knows, Australia welcomes foreign investment, but it has to be in our national economic interest. There are strict rules and thresholds that apply to people purchasing agricultural or commercial land in Australia. These are enforced, again, as he knows, by the foreign investment decision of the Treasury. We allocated almost another $16 million in the 24 budget to enhance this kind of monitoring and enforcement and also to strengthen and streamline the system. The settings and thresholds in this case are applicable to private investors from the United States. They were established by our free trade agreement, which was entered into by the Coalition 20-odd years ago, and that remains the case today. What we are doing, Mr Speaker, is we're making sure that our foreign investment arrangements keep pace. Obviously, we see these sorts of cases pop up from time to time. We spend time analysing those cases and working out whether a change is necessary. But overall, the FIRB system is robust. We have made some recent changes. They've been about quickening the pace of approvals. There are some historical cases like this one which pique our interest, but not inconsistent with the arrangements set up by those opposite. And so my commitment to the House and more broadly is to continue to make sure that the arrangements are the right arrangements to protect our national interests. We do have robust foreign investment screening regime. That's very important That's the way that we build trust in attracting the foreign investment that our economy needs. From time to time, when cases like this pop up, we make sure that we take that into consideration to make sure that the FIRB system remains as good as it can be.
The call to Honourable for McEwen.
My question is to the Treasurer. Can the Treasurer update the House on what progress the Albanese Labor government has made when it comes to housing and in our economy more broadly?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Mr Speaker, there's no member of this House more in touch with their local community than the member for McEwen. Thank him for his question, Mr Speaker. Now, since this House last met, we got some important reminders of the progress that Australians are making together in our economy. And we've spoken a lot about housing today, Mr Speaker, and yesterday as well. And a really important part of that recent progress has been made on interest rates, Mr Speaker. When we came to office, interest rates were already rising because inflation was much higher than it is now, and it was rising fast. Now inflation has fallen substantially and in a sustained and welcome way. We'll get more data, monthly inflation data, on Wednesday. That monthly figure usually bounces around a bit, but anything in the twos will be a handy reminder of how far we've come since the days of inflation higher than 6% and rising when we came to office. Now, that progress on inflation has given the Reserve Bank the confidence and the comfort that they needed to cut interest rates. Not just once, not just twice, but 3 times, all in the space of 6 months. When interest rates were cut a couple of weeks ago, it kicked off probably the best 3 consecutive days of economic news we've had for some time. On the Tuesday, interest rates were cut. That provided welcome relief to millions of Australians with a mortgage under pressure. On the Wednesday of that week, annual real wages grew for the 7th consecutive quarter, the strongest real wages growth in 5 years. And remember, real wages were falling fast when we came to office. On the Thursday of that week, unemployment ticked down and we learned that around 25,000 jobs were created, new jobs, in the month of July. Under this government, it remains the case that average unemployment is lower than for any other government in the last 50 years. And last week we saw confidence lift substantially and the stock market cracked 9,000 points for the first time ever. Now, we know that there is much more work to do. We know that people are still under pressure. We know that the global environment is uncertain, that growth in our economy is softer than we want it to be, and there are persistent structural issues which we are paying attention to. We know that the economy is finely balanced between the progress that we have made as Australians and the more productive economy that we need to see in the future to sustain that progress in living standards. Now, those opposite, they always want to talk our economy down. And when they talk our economy down, they talk the Australian people down as well, Mr Speaker. Under this government, we have come a long way together. We are focused on delivery. We're considering the next steps in a collaborative way because we know that the best progress that we make is the progress we make together. You can see that in inflation, interest rates, real wages and low unemployment.
Give the call to the honourable member for McKellar.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Treasurer. In February 2023, the government commissioned a review of public sector board appointments. At that time, the Minister for the Public Service stated, in line with the government's commitment to transparency, a report will be published after the review is finalised in mid-2023. The final report was handed to government over 18 months ago, and yet last sitting week the government opposed a motion in the Senate for an order of production of documents to make the report public. Treasurer, why has the government reneged on their self-declared commitment to transparency?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and to the member for McKellar for the opportunity to answer this question on Minister Gallagher's behalf. And I begin by saying that the government has a broad and ambitious public service reform agenda. It is about transparency. It is about making sure that we make the best appointments that we can as a government as well. And the Briggs report is an important part of that work, but it's not the only part of that work. In our first term, we improved and reformed the public service to boost its capability, its integrity and its performance under a wasted decade under the coalition defined by Robodebt. We established the National Anti-Corruption Commission. We strengthened protection for whistleblowers. We embedded stewardship as a core value of the public service into law. We provided critically needed resources to underfunded areas of the public service, like processing the backlog of veterans' claims as well. I pay tribute to the Minister for that. Now, all of this is part of our ambitious agenda, and we did, as the honourable member said, ask Linnell Briggs to review the arrangements for appointments to public service boards as well. We asked Linnell Briggs to provide us with advice on clarifying the role of public sector boards and the skills we need on those boards, how board members should be identified and recruited, and how we improve the diversity of board membership. And here we have been making very substantial progress. We've improved public sector board diversity since coming to office. The most recent data showed us that much more than half of government board positions are now held by women, the highest level since reporting began in 2009. And I know that the member for Mackellar cares deeply about diversity when it comes to government appointments. I wanted to say it's a source of considerable pride to me as Treasurer and to this government. In the Treasury portfolio, for the first time, a woman as the head of the Reserve Bank, for the first time as the head of the PC, for the first time as the head of Treasury. Mr Speaker.
The member for Mackellar on a point of order.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. Just the point of the question was, will the report be made public and when? Thank you.
Yes, I understand you'd like a date, but the Treasurer needs to be directly relevant. He is giving context regarding the board appointments that he has made, and that is being directly relevant. So he may continue.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Speaker, and to the honourable member again. The point that I'm making there is Linnell Briggs is one of her main things that we asked her to focus on was diversity in appointments, and we've got a very good record on this side of the House when it comes to diversity in appointments in the Treasury portfolio. For the first time, Treasury, PC and the Reserve Bank all led by women, and I thank them for accepting those key appointments. Now, we've received the Briggs report, as the honourable member rightly points out. We are working through it in our usual considered and methodical way. We'll make the report public in due course following that careful consideration.
Call to the member for Brisbane.
My question is to the Leader of the House. How has the Albanese Labor government used Parliament to deliver more homes for Australians? And is there anything before Parliament that puts these homes at risk?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Speaker, and I thank the member for Brisbane for the question. And it's good to know that we now have a member for Brisbane who will always support the building of more homes for Australians. That importance of supply is something that, when it's talked about, there's claims across the chamber that we agree on supply. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Industry, Skills and Training in the previous term actually said that supply was the key. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition only said last week, boosting housing supply is the closest thing we have to a silver bullet. A silver bullet. So it's worth having a look at, when that silver bullet has been in front of the House, how people have dealt with it, as to whether they've actually tried to boost supply. When the Housing Australia Future Fund was introduced, that was 30,000 homes at stake, 30,000 social and affordable homes. When it was introduced, February 23, the Coalition voted against it. The Greens ran out of the room. In May of that year, the Coalition and the Greens teamed up in the Senate to delay it. In June, Coalition and the Greens again teamed up in the Senate to delay it. In September of that year, it finally passed, but with the Coalition still opposed to 30,000 homes. But that wasn't the only measure to come before the Parliament. Help to Buy was another that came before the Parliament. Now, for that, it wasn't 30,000 homes, 40,000 homes at stake. Maybe then those opposite would be interested in the silver bullet. What did they do in November 23? When it was introduced, Coalition and the Greens teamed up in the Senate to delay it by 2 months. In February of the following year, Coalition and the Greens in this chamber voted against it, but it was passed. September of that year, nearly a year after it was introduced, Coalition and the Greens again voted to delay 40,000 homes, and only in November of last year it was finally passed, with the coalition still voting no. But then build to rent comes up, 80,000 homes. Maybe they'll be interested in the silver bullet now. In July of last year, Coalition and the Greens voted in the Senate to split the bill and delay it. In November of last year it finally passed. The Coalition's still voting against. But you think, oh, maybe that was last term. Maybe now they're doing a reset. There is in the Senate today a disallowance on build to rent, the very scheme to provide 80,000 homes. To this day, those opposite, when they see a chance for people to have their home, they vote against.
Order. Give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. This morning the Prime Minister snapped at a journalist saying he had given, quote, 5,324 answers, end quote, as to why he has failed to secure a meeting with the President of the United States. Can the Prime Minister table these 5,324 answers? And could the Prime Minister explain to the Australian public whether his decision to recognise the State of Palestine means he is more likely to get a meeting with President Trump or less likely to get a meeting with President Trump?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much. I support the Palestinian bid for statehood, in part because it will give heart to the ordinary people of the West Bank and Gaza. We in the international community must stand in solidarity with those seeking the non-violent path to a secure Israel and an independent Palestine. After 2 generations of strife and war, are we going to admit to our children that their parents could not even find a path to peace, or worse still, that we did not even try? They're not my words, they're the words of your leader. And the fact is that we take international policy seriously. And the fact that the Manager of Opposition Business asked such a flippant question about the relationship between Australia and the United States or about Middle East peace shows how unworthy they are, those opposite. We continue to engage with the United States constructively, and indeed the Deputy Prime Minister is in the United States as we speak, meeting with counterparts as we announced. We continue to engage constructively. I've had 3 constructive discussions with President Trump. We'll continue to engage in international politics in a way that protects our sovereignty, in a way that stands up for our national interest, and in a way in which Australia plays a positive role in the world, as we have historically. One of the other things that has defined Australia's international engagement is that overwhelmingly it has been bipartisan. If you compare the response and the childish nature of that question with what the Labor opposition, with how the Labor opposition responded to the announcement by Prime Minister Morrison to the AUKUS arrangements, I think that is all clear to see. We on this side of the House responded in a constructive, positive way. We always stood up for Australia's interests, and I note and I want to thank the member for Canning for his remarks, where he said recently, just last week in an interview, that when the Australian Prime Minister is up against any criticism, which can be seen to be criticism of Australia, he'll stand up for Australia. That is something that we consistently have done, and we'll continue to stand up for the national interest, and they'll continue to show just how irrelevant they are.
Order. Give the call to the member for Gilmore.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government getting on with the job of reducing emissions and acting on climate change? Are there any proposals the government is being asked to consider that would take Australia backwards?
Call to the Minister. The member for Hume. Just going to move forward, and the Prime Minister cease rejecting, so I can hear from the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for the question. I can report to the House that Australia and Australians are making real progress when it comes to climate action, Mr Speaker. Today we've seen the release of Australia's emission data showing a reduction in Australia's emissions in the year to March of 6.5 million tonnes in every sector apart from transport. That is Australia and Australians getting on with the job. And Australians are also getting on with the job of installing cheaper home batteries, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to report to the House that as of today, 36,592 Australian households have installed a cheaper home battery under the Albanese government's policy, and I'm particularly pleased to tell the member for Gilmore that more of her constituents have introduced a cheaper home battery than any other electorate in New South Wales, a fact that we celebrated on my visit with the member for Gilmore to Dolphin Point last week when we visited Mike, who's just installed a cheaper home battery. And I can tell the House that the second electorate in New South Wales for the record for installing cheaper home batteries is Richmond. So congratulations to the member of Community of Richmond. And third is Page. So congratulations to the member for Page. What this shows is that up and down the coast, all through regional Australia, Australians understand that's what is good for the planet is good for their pocket. That's what regional Australians know. They know that they can get on with the job of reducing bills and emissions in their household just as we can in the country. Now, the honourable member asked me if we're being asked to consider any alternative plans, and of course the House is. Now, we know, Mr Speaker, you can feel the tension in the air. The country is waiting with bated breath on tenterhooks to find out what the Canavan review might possibly recommend when it comes to net zero. He's been charged by the Leader of the Opposition, the National Party, on telling them what they should do, what they should think about net zero. But not everyone's waiting. Not everyone's waiting for the results of the Canavan review. The Leader of the Nationals was out on the weekend voting to scrap net zero at the LNP conference. We saw the anti-net zero bill introduced this morning, formally moved this morning, not by the member for New England, it turns out, but by the member for Wide Bay, seconded by the member for Groom, Mr Speaker. I will always yield to the member for New England.
The member for New England will have to state his point of order.
Relevance, definitely on relevancy. At the start, he got the bill wrong. Now he's got the date it was introduced wrong. It was actually introduced quite some weeks ago.
It's not a point of order. The member for New England has been here long enough to know that is an abuse of the standing orders, and he's now warned. The Minister for Climate Change and Energy will return to the question.
And I was asked, Mr Speaker, of course, whether the House and the government is being asked to consider any alternatives. We are, by the coalition, because this bill was formally moved by a member of the National Party, seconded by a member of the Liberal Party. The member for New England has pointed out his approach has the broad support of the coalition. Nothing unites them as much as opposing dealing with climate change. Nothing unites them as much as saying to regional Australia, we will do nothing about the challenge of climate change, which will see droughts and natural disasters increase their damage across regional Australia. That's why regional Australia looks to this side of the House for leadership when it comes to climate.
Order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Warringah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, the CSIRO estimates that every $1 spent on disaster preparation saves up to $11 on disaster recovery costs, yet less than 13% of the National Emergency Management Agency's budget is spent on preparation and resilience. Disasters are now costing $38 billion per year to Australians. Will you take this opportunity to re-evaluate funding priorities and ensure greater investment in resilience?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question, and I'll ask the Minister, McBain, to add to my comments. But we are certainly very conscious about the cost of climate change. It is real. It is real, and in recent months I, of course, have been to regional South Australia visiting drought. I have been to the mid-north coast where there have been floods.
Order. The member for Moncrief.
And I've been to South Australia as well, Kangaroo Island, just last week, seeing firsthand the impact of climate change. There is no question that whilst you can't say every single weather event in Australia is because of climate change, what you can say is that the science told us that there would be more events and they would be more intense. And that is what we are seeing playing out. Now, with the range of funds, including the announcement that I made last week, was about changes to the RIC program being made available so that the issue of resilience and investment can be made through that program for issues which are unprecedented, of course. In South Australia at the moment, what you have is a combination of events. You have the floodwaters flowing down through the Murray-Darling Basin, impacting with sediments being washed out and nutrients into the water there. But the thing that's really having an impact is that the water is about 2 degrees higher than it normally would be at this time of the year. That is having an impact on the environment, which is having an impact, therefore, on our economy. So I think the member is quite right to point towards investing up front. That's something my government is looking at in a range of areas as well as providing for local infrastructure programs that the minister might want to talk about as well.
Call to the Minister for Emergency Order. The member for Moncrieff. I'm trying to call the Minister for Emergency Management, Local Government.
Minister, and it's because of this Prime Minister that there is actually investment in disaster response and readiness. We've created the Disaster Response Fund, a $1 billion fund over 5 years, with projects already being rolled out in rounds 1, 2 and 3 just announced. Big projects like levees, as well as small projects like lifting up the capability of culverts to 2-lane concrete bridges. But not only is it important to invest in hard infrastructure, the soft infrastructure is incredibly important, investing in preparedness programs in local communities across the country, just like communities in Lismore that I visited last week, or south-west Queensland, which I visited the week before, working with those local councils on priority projects in disaster readiness.
Call to the honourable member for Aston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General. How is the Albanese Labor government progressing reform to the Working with Children checks system, and are there any recent updates to this important work?
Call to the Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. Because the foremost priority of any government is to keep Australians safe, and that especially extends to the most vulnerable in our community, our young people. So I'm pleased to inform the House, Mr Speaker, that on the 15th of August, Attorneys-General from across Australia agreed to deliver ambitious reforms to address systemic gaps in working with children check regimes. Attorneys-General agreed to toughen the system to ensure that if you're banned from holding a working with children check in one jurisdiction, you're banned in all of them. So banned in one, banned in all. Now, importantly, Mr Speaker, the Commonwealth states and territories were united in our commitment to progress this reform and urgently work towards implementation by the end of this year. And secondly, Attorneys-General also agreed to strengthen risk assessments and exclusion criteria for working with children checks, meaning improved safeguards for children and families. And third, the Commonwealth has also committed to progressing a national continuous checking capability, with the aim to have continuous near real-time monitoring of national changes to criminal history information of working with children check holders. And this builds on a pilot already underway by the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission. States and territories have also agreed to start working on the complex task of how to integrate with the National Hub as we work towards better information sharing between jurisdictions, and I thank them for working with the Commonwealth on this package of vital reforms. Now, Mr Speaker, we know that there are some 6 million working with children check holders right around Australia, and the vast majority are good people who do the right thing. However, for those nefarious individuals who seek to exploit loopholes and forum shop where they have the opportunity, the message is clear: your time is up. Our reforms will strengthen the system, they will lift standards, and they will ensure a safer environment for our young people. And, Mr Speaker, I note that these reforms also complement significant work underway to improve child safety outcomes in educational settings, and I especially acknowledge my most excellent colleague, Minister Clare's work in this area. Together, our government is working to ensure our children grow up safe from harm, and we will not rest until that is a reality for every Australian family.
Call to the member for Dawson.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry. Can the Minister confirm that the smelters in Tomago, Whyalla, Mount Isa and Tasmania are all either under administration, in crisis talks or are seeking government bailouts, and the cost of energy is the reason for this?
Give the call to the Minister representing the Minister for Order. I think the member for Riverina there will be not here for the answer if he continues with that. The Minister representing the Minister for Industry has the call.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for his question, which is about the future of manufacturing in this country, in particular the future of smelters. As we've said in this place many times, the sustainability of our domestic minerals and metals processing capabilities is vital to our national interest, and that's why we're backing jobs, backing manufacturing and backing heavy industry. Now, the member also talked about energy. Obviously, energy is a critical part of the mix, and that's why we're investing record amounts in renewing our energy grid, backing renewable energy, which is the cheapest form of new energy, as well as improving reliability. I stood with the Prime Minister and other ministers when we backed Aussie industry with new investment in energy. The truth is, Mr Speaker, the Coalition had a chance to fix these issues, but they left us with a graveyard of discarded energy policies, by my last count, 23. We're getting on with fixing the job by taking a considered approach, and Minister Ayres in the other place is working very hard at this. We've put aside funding for smelters, we've put aside funding for the Green Iron Fund, we've put aside $2 billion for aluminium to help with their energy transition. There's more to do, Mr Speaker, but the truth is we're not going to cop a tax from the other side who sat on their hands for 9 long years and did nothing about it.
Has the Minister concluded his answer? The member for Dawson, a point of order.
On relevance, Mr Speaker, it was a very, very tight question. Are the smelters under administration or are they in crisis talks, and is it because of the energy price?
It's not an opportunity to ask the question again. The Minister is giving a directly relevant answer to the question about what the government is doing regarding the specific topic that you were asked about. So he's been directly relevant. He'll continue.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'll continue. We're working closely with the companies involved, as well as their workers and the unions representing them, and the state governments, because it's important that we come at a solution together rather than using this as a political football. The truth is we need to solve the energy crisis that we inherited from the other side of government, as well as dealing with the long-term issues in the global trade. And so we're going to get on with the job. We'll back Aussie manufacturing. We're not the side of Parliament that cheered when the car industry left under your reign of power. We're going to back manufacturing. We're going to back Aussie jobs, and we're going to fix the mess that you left us.
Call to the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to strengthen safety in early childhood education and care?
Give the call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my good friend the member for Bendigo for her question. Mr Speaker, when I last briefed the Parliament on this, we had just passed legislation to cut off funding to childcare centres that don't meet safety standards. And I can advise the House that we have now used those powers. 37 centres have now been placed on notice, and there is more to come. I can also advise the House that we've taken the next steps that we need to take. On Friday, Education Ministers met and agreed to establish a National Educator Register, national mandatory child safety training for all workers in our centres, a national trial of CCTV in up to 300 centres across the country, a ban on the use of personal mobile phones in centres, more information for parents on the conditions and the actions of regulators at the centres where their children go, and more inspections and more spot checks. Mr Speaker, predators prey on vulnerable children and they prey on vulnerable systems, and there are vulnerabilities in the system. These predators use phones as part of committing their crimes, and that's why we've got to get them out of centres. They distract and they groom other staff members, and that's why staff training is important, to know what to look out for and what to do. And they often move from centre to centre to centre, and that's why the National Educator Register is important. To make all of this happen, the Australian government is investing an extra $189 million in these reforms, and the states are stepping up as well. We've all got to step up. The Australian government, states and territories, the people that run these centres too. This is a good example of Labor and Liberal governments working together. And can I thank the federal opposition as well for their support for these measures. What we agreed to on Friday aren't the only things that we need to do, but they are what we have to do if we're going to build back confidence in a system that mums and dads across the country have got to have confidence in. The truth is that this work will never end. There will always be bad people looking for weaknesses in the system. But the actions that we took last week are an important next step in helping to keep our children safe.
The Prime Minister.
I ask further questions to be placed on the notice paper.